Hey, welcome to the Cam and Otis Show. We're a father-son podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. Today, we're lucky enough to be joined by James Cluskey, former professional athlete turned entrepreneur. And man, I'm excited about this because there's something's burning at me. But I'm gonna let you say hello before I get into it. How you doing, James?
I'm great and delighted to be here today and join you guys.
So one of my things, Camden and I, as you know from our time in the green room and our pre-show, Camden and I are huge rugby fans, and I'm a philosopher, lover of philosophy, and my favorite philosopher is truthfully the great American baseball player Yogi Berra. And my favorite quote from Yogi is, and I was just writing about this morning, so it's very fresh in my head, is life imitates baseball. And Camden and I have modified that into rugby also. But I'm curious, as a former professional tennis player, how does life imitate tennis?
Yeah, really, really good question. I think, as a business person, as an individual, I think tennis, you have to have a short memory. So, you would play I would have played 30 tournaments a year when I was playing professionally. I didn't win every week. I didn't play well every week. I won a number of tournaments, but I also lost a number of matches and tournaments and so on. So you have to have a pretty short memory because you have to pick yourself up the next day and go again. And I think that's the similarities in terms of life and tennis. And then secondly to that is even more so you have to have a short memory, right? Because in terms of winning a game of tennis, so it's first person to 6 games. You need to win 4 points in a game to win the game. You can lose a lot of points, and again, you have to be able to refocus really quickly. If you miss a bad shot or make a bad error, you have to be able to bounce back from that, be resilient. And then lastly, I think a really good point is that you need to see what your opponent is doing, and you need to tactically be adaptable and be open to changing your tactics really quick. And I think that's what sport teaches you as well, that in-game management and changing your tactics.
Talking about that like mental reset and getting that break between games and getting back after a loss, what was your technique when you were playing tennis, and then have you been able to apply that into the business world?
Yeah, I think a couple of different things. I think the first thing someone gave me the advice years ago was never get too high or too low. And I think that was something that's kind of stayed with me into business now, right? So, it was actually a professional tennis player said it to me. He said, "Look, there's good weeks and bad weeks. When you win a big tournament, yes, you celebrate success, but it's not, the be all and end all. And then when you're on a bad run or times are tough, you're not getting too downbeat." And I think in business, I think that's really prevalent, right? I mean, I think for business owners, salespeople, whatever we're in, there's good days and bad days. If you're a salesperson and you make a big sale, and that's great, but also you might lose a deal last minute. And I think, I think in business, I think we probably don't talk enough about how there's nothing really for second place, right? So you could go through a process in a sales process, for example. You could be trying to win a big contract. You don't get any. The guy who comes second, you get 0, right? So I think there's a lot to be learned from sport. I'm not saying that I did it right all the time, but I think the best players that I came across were the ones that, showed up the next day, right, and put themselves out there and trained hard and came back and like that saying, half the battle is showing up, right? It's putting in the work.
How did you when you did that model, the loop model, if you will, of perform, maybe win, maybe lose, but adjust to that continuous improvement? Because the game that you started playing when you first started playing tennis is not the same game you were playing when you ended your career as a professional athlete.
Yeah, I think you learn by doing, but I think one of the things I really really believe in is that surrounding yourself with good people. I think that's, it's a very simple thing to say, but I think when you're surrounded by positive people that are that will tell you the truth. I'm not saying that has to be sugar coated, but that there's you're driving yourself and your vision and your goals, but there's people there that are supporting you and pushing you. And that's where a coach comes in as well, right? And I think, a tennis coach, for example, Roger Federer would have had a tennis coach. The tennis coach wasn't as good as Roger Federer at tennis, but he might pick up on little things and might look at something in a different way. You might see something technically with his swing or tactically that he's doing wrong. So I think having those good people and finding good people is really essential to that continuous improvement. And then it's the philosophy of always striving to get better, right? It's always looking for that 1%, and the margins are so small, whether it be in sport, high performance sport, or business, right? It's you can have match point and lose a match, and the same in business. You can be very close and not get over the line. So it's those small margins, and what are those little things that will help you get over the line and do big things.
Like you hinted that, James, you weren't playing the same game. The game changes as you progress in levels. I'm curious, did you reach a point of burnout at any point where you weren't loving the game the same? And if so, how did you find that love again?
Yeah, it's actually a funny enough story. So I played college tennis at LSU, and I was ranked 3 in America in tennis. We were a top 10 team. And at the end, my senior year, I always wanted to play professionally, but my senior year, I was a bit burnt out at the end. I was kind of tired of the practice and the academics and all that sort of stuff. I just needed a break. And I said to my coach, I'm just exhausted. I can't do this. And I said to my coach, I'm going to take 2 weeks off. And he said to me, really seriously, don't put a time limit on it. So if it's 2 weeks, if it's a month, if it's never, right? So don't put a time limit. You need to come back fresh. And I said, no, 2 weeks. And about, I was back in Dublin, and I was going out. I was going out to the pubs for the first couple of nights, and I was waking up late. And my dad is a farmer by background, and he's not much interested in tennis. But I think it's probably where I got my work ethic from. I remember he came into my room at like 11 in the morning. He said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm just taking a break." He's like, "Oh, I'm taking a break. Well, come out. You're working with me for the afternoon." So then I went out and worked with him, and I thought, you know what? I think this tennis thing is actually a bit better. So I'll go back and play some tennis. So I think definitely I've had moments like that, which was an extended break, and then also, where you lose a tough match. And you lose a tough match, and it's tough to get up for practice the next day. But we all don't wake up 100% of the time jumping out of bed, right? But I think if our goals and our vision is strong and our values are strong and what we're trying to achieve, I think that's where we can kind of push through that kind of tiredness and burnout and so on. And then finally, I just say I think that the evolution is, to work smart, right? It is to listen to your body, listen to your mind when you do need a break. So just to say that, but I also think there is days where you're not running onto the court excited, but you have to go and do it.
Could you describe, because you touched on something I think is a great life lesson to discuss. Could you describe the day after losing a tough match, what you do to bounce back, to get back into it?
Yes,
because that happens in business all the time too.
Yeah, and I think one of the things my coach used to talk about was immediately after the match, we wouldn't talk about the match. We would just let it go. We would just say, okay, that's it. I think it's too raw almost to go through it. But actually, the next day then is the time when you maybe can decompress a little bit and nowadays all your matches are recorded at pro level, so you can go and watch back and look at the stats and review and so on. And I know I know you're a big rugby fan. I know a few of the Irish rugby guys, and they talk about that they do a lot of review sessions, right? So you play the game on the Saturday, on the Monday morning, you come in and you review. And I can't remember who the player was saying that historically, if you did something bad in the game, you would kind of hide in the corner and be like, oh God, the coach is going to pick on me here. But he said the culture that was created under, someone like Joe Schmidt and Andy Farrell now is that they own the mistake. They come in and they, this is what I did wrong, and how do I get better, and how do I push forward? So I think the day after a match, depending on where you're going next and so on in tennis, is to review the previous match and then get out on the practice court and get better in the situation and learn from the match and move forward.
Why do you think people are so resistant to own the mistake at a higher level? Because at the younger ages, I get it. You're not as mature. You still have a very raw ego, and you don't want to be outcast from the team. But at the higher level, you have that kind of awareness. Why do you think people still make that kind of a mistake?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to have difficult conversations. I think people can beat around the bush a little bit, but I think the philosophy should be that feedback is a gift. Feedback is something to use and use as a gift. Again, one story from one kind of legendary rugby story, and I keep talking about rugby now because you guys are such big rugby fans, but
we don't mind talking about rugby.
So Pat Lam, who was the coach at Connacht, who's now at Bristol, I was in Pat's company and he was telling a story about feedback and that area. And he said that when he came to Ireland, he said to one of the young players, he said, do you want feedback? Do you like feedback? And he said, the player said, oh, I love feedback. Oh, feedback's great, right? And that's what everyone kind of says, right? And he said he took the team out to a restaurant. They ordered a bunch of steaks. Steak comes. One of the players starts eating a steak, had asked for it to be medium done. The steak was well done. He says, oh, my steak it's medium, it should have been well. The owner, the waiter comes along and says, guys, how's everyone's meal? And then what does the player do? He turns around and says, oh, amazing, yeah, great, thanks. And Pat's point was that you're doing the restaurant a disservice by not actually giving that feedback, so that they can improve the service and make the restaurant better and so on, right? So I think it's trying to teach people and encourage them that feedback is progress is success, and that's how you're going to get better, and that's how you're going to improve. There
was a great quote that just saw out last night in the Miami Heat Milwaukee Bucks game. The Bucks' big star, oh my gosh, I'm going to butcher it. Giannis Antetokounmpo, I think that's about right. But the Greek freak, there we go. I can get good.
If you say it really fast.
Right, exactly. Just confidence. But he had a great quote. They asked him if he felt like his season was a failure. And he said, there's no failure in sports. He said, Michael Jordan won, 5 championships, went to the champion, or played 15 seasons, won 5 championships, something along those lines. He's like, were those other 10 seasons failures? No, it's just part of the game. Only one team gets to win every year. And I think having that kind of an approach of it, just like, it's not really a failure. It's just a loss, just a temporary setback. Because when you zoom out and look at the big picture, you're learning from it. So it's never really a failure.
Yeah. And I think on that, a sports career and a business career and a business and a life, it's never a straight line, right? It's always a zigzag along. So we're all just trying to figure it out. And I used to love, on the basketball side, I used to love reading John Wooden from UCLA. And his quote was the quote that I had on success on my wall, that success is, and I'll probably butcher the quote, but it was, success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction of knowing you did the best to become the best you're capable of becoming, or something along those lines. And what does success mean? Success means different things to different people, right? So I think we're all trying to figure it out. We're all trying to put one foot in front of the other. And for me, it was always around, how can I try and improve on a daily basis? What can I learn from my wins? What can I learn from my losses? and try and get better. And look, I'm not saying I was perfect at that because I wasn't, but I think it's important to have that kind of mindset that you're going to learn and you're going to be open to learning.
How did you come to the decision that your season of being a professional tennis player was over, was ending? How did that happen?
Yeah, geez, you asked some great questions. So I read a book actually. Got Robin Sharma, who wrote the book "The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari." I've read a couple of his.
Very, very good
Yeah,
book. I've got it on my shelf behind me.
I love that book, and I read a couple of his books, and there was one book I can't remember what it wasn't that book, but it was one of his books subsequently, and it was like it said the line was something like "When you know, you'll know," because and that's the question, right? And my ranking, so I got to 145 in the world. My ranking had stagnated a little bit, but I don't know if I was burned out, but I think I lost the fire for the travel and the work you had to put in and so on. So there was a moment where I lost a match in Italy, and I just lost the match, and I thought, you know what, that's it. That's it for me. And I went back and I cried in my room, which is in a small town in Italy. I was like, okay, I think I need to do something else. Now I look back on my career with pride and everything, but I think it was just, you've put your whole life into something. And I think for me, the decision was that I love business. I had other interests as well. I love to read books. I love to learn. I didn't see myself just as solely as a tennis player. I definitely had other interests while I played. Mm-hmm. And I think in sport, sometimes the writing is on the wall and people kind of stay around too long. And I mean, that's the age-old question, right? Is when, when to retire or when to stop. And we see it with whether it's Tom Brady or anyone, like people that retire, then they come back, then they, So I just kind of had a sense that I know this is the right time, and also I wanted to kind of start to explore business and a different career essentially.
I'm curious, did you experience that slight drop off once that thought into your mind? I think I don't know who we got this quote from originally, Dad. I know you and I have referenced it about 5 times, but the idea that as soon as you think you might be done, you're done. Because once you have that thought in the back of your mind, you slow down a bit. I can think to the last days of my rugby career and like just getting run over in tackles and being out of position, not bringing my feet with me. All these things I've been doing for years were just completely gone because I wasn't thinking, or actually more accurately, probably I was thinking too much. It wasn't instinct anymore. Did you experience that at all with tennis where you got that drop off, or was it after that loss more so that you noticed it?
No, I think that's fair. I think in the last couple of months, I think it's like back to the previous part of the conversation, right? It's that 1% difference, and if I think at a high level in sport, I think you really notice that 1%, right? So I don't know if you watch soccer, but Newcastle beat Tottenham 6-1 at the weekend. Tottenham were 5-0 down after 20 minutes. And they've kind of just, now they might win tonight, they play Man United, but they've just kind of been in a really bad place. And if you take your foot off the gas that little bit, those small margins make such a big difference. On the flip side, I do know of people that sometimes when you know that maybe you're finishing, or you have less pressure on yourself, right? You put less pressure on yourself. And then maybe you swing for the fences and you play a little bit more free and you play more relaxed. So there's definitely 2 ends of the spectrum, but I would lean more on your end of the spectrum, that once you lose that grit or determination, I think you may as well you may as well call it then.
So when you retired, you started coaching as a tennis player, right? You shifted from professional athlete, which is fairly common. I find it interesting that you were Richard Branson's personal tennis coach, who he's not a tennis player, but somebody who loves the game. How did that connection happen? How'd you get in with Richard Branson?
Yeah, so on the tennis piece, so the transition was I actually ended up working with an executive coach who I spoke to today, who's a great friend of mine, who was a very successful business guy. And what we said was, and I remember this conversation, that I knew that I could walk into a tennis club and coach a number of hours if I wanted to do that. But actually the decision I made was I had a set number of tennis coaching hours in my diary to live and income and so on. But then the rest of the time, a couple of days a week, I actually spent meeting people for coffees and going into businesses, getting a little bit out of my comfort zone and seeing what else was out there and what I liked and didn't like and so on. So I kind of gave myself that opportunity to be exposed kind of outside the bubble. And I think the biggest learning was, man, there's a big bubble outside sport, right? That you don't really realize when you're in the bubble, and that's kind of hard to explain as well. But and then I think Richard's that piece was very, very, very lucky, but then also you make your own luck in ways as well. So I played an ATP event, and I was at the players' party. And a couple of players were talking about this event called the Necker Cup, which was on Richard Branson's on his island, where some of the best business people in the world, some of the best tennis players in the world come and play in this casual pro-am. And I thought, man, that sounds amazing, right? I'm really into business. I loved his books when I was younger, all that stuff. And I got the details of the guy who runs the event. I had a loose connection. I knew someone that knew him through tennis. I called him and I said, look, I'd love to come to Necker. I'll stand on the court all day, so you'll never be short a pro, while Nadal and these guys are off kind of having their drinks and stuff. And I thought my philosophy was, what's the worst he can do? He's just going to come back and say, no, like, leave me alone, or no, never, and I never kind of talked to him again, right? So he came back and said, yeah, okay, come over for the event. So I went over. That was 2015, and then I met Richard on the court, had a chat with him, and then I got an email about a month later from the guy who was running the island, and he said, would you come back and coach him tennis for a month? So I ended up doing that numerous times and still do, and then I've been with him in the UK a couple of times and different places. So yeah, so really, really lucky. And it's like I suppose a master's in entrepreneurship, being able to kind of sit there and have a cup of tea with Richard Branson and ask his advice and pick his brains on stuff,
Did you see the application of the entrepreneur mindset towards tennis? Because we're kind of all talking about it from the other direction, where we're talking sport into business. His seems like it would be a little bit more business than into sport. Did you see that same kind of mindset?
Yeah, definitely. So I know that he was a sports person in school, and then he had a knee injury, and that kind of stopped his budding sports career. Now I don't know. I mean, he was playing soccer in school, and he hurt his knee. But I definitely see the relationship with sport and business, and I definitely have his mindset and the way he looks after himself and his energy is absolutely incredible. I mean, incredible, right? So I did 30 days with him last year. He played tennis 28 days, twice a day. The guy never misses a session. Mm-hmm. He's always on time. And I said to him one day, I said, we were talking about, I actually can't fully remember what we were talking about. I said, I did say, if there's one word that would describe you, what would it be? And we were chatting about that. And then I said the word relentless. And he said, yeah, that's it. Like, he is relentless when it comes to his fitness. He's all in. His business, he's all in. And he's just got so much energy and so much passion and drive. And it's contagious, right, if you're around him.
That's really interesting, and truthfully, from the little bit I know about Richard Branson, is not that surprising to hear that and that dedication, because that's so important. And it's just like, in the professional athlete sort of sense is you have to be full in, or you can never get to that next level. Because and I'll pick on Camden's big sister Sierra, and her level of play and soccer was great, but her full into it wasn't there,
Yeah.
right? And because I can remember her on the pitch being an excellent player, but an excellent player at that level, but not wanting to do the full in to be an excellent player at the next level. And that's an interesting thing when you start to think about other aspects of your life and in business also. Either you're all in or you're not.
Yeah, and I think. Sorry, Otis.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I think that's a fascinating thing that probably we don't talk enough about. Say, as in your daughter's story there, I think it's really having an honest conversation around what is it you want to do, because there's a lot of tennis players that are a lot more talented than I was when I was a kid, and they started going out, they started doing other things, and it wasn't for them, right? And I think, I actually think when I finished playing professionally and I coached those couple of days a week, I coached a group of kids who were, it was said to me, these kids are high performance kids, right? And I was trying to, train them really hard and stuff. But actually, when I look back on it, and at the time I kind of had this realization, they actually don't really want, like, they just want to be social, fun players, right? So they don't really want to go that extra mile. Now, you could say it's the coaches. The coach has to inspire people as well. But I also think there's a bit of from within, right? Where if someone doesn't want to do something, then it doesn't really matter. I mean, they're not going to do it, right? So I think that's an interesting conversation around, and even in business, right? It's like people have different priorities. People have different people are at different stages of their life. All those types of things that I think we need to factor in.
I think the important piece there also is that that spectrum of interest, that spectrum of talent, all of those different pieces, all of those people matter for the sport, and the same thing applies to business. Dad, last time you were down here in Tucson, we had this conversation with the rest of the Arizona coaching staff about the players who don't want to go pro. They might not even be that great, but they just love the game. And you never want to push those kids away. You want to give them a spot and give them a place to put in their love for the game, because that's how you continue to grow the sport beyond this, immediate group. And I think, bringing it back to business, I think you see a lot of people make that same mistake, where it's like you go to an employee and you're like, hey, especially like in the startup world, and you're building something up, and you're like, hey, do you want to go do this? Like, you could go up, I want you to be my COO. We could make this so big and all this. And it's like, you know what, man? I kind of like this, and it's like, I'm okay here. And so many people, because of, I think, their own insecurity as the leader, they wind up not allowing that person to stick around or not be in that spot, or they wind up pushing the person away because of their own insecurity. But in reality, you need that full spectrum. Just like in rugby to grow the game, you need those people in your business, because you don't want every single person. If you had 100 people in your business and they were all just relentless every single day, pushing, that would be a terrible environment, because you need somebody to break the ice a little bit. You need somebody to calm it down. You need somebody to add a little bit of variance to it. And I think that's another one of those areas where, life imitates sports.
Yeah, I think that's it's a great point, Camden. You need those kind of different personalities. And when you, at the start of that point you made, I was thinking of, so my coach would never say good luck before a match. He'd always say have fun, was the thing he always said. And secondly to that, there was a study, and it was amongst actually teenage girls who dropped out of sport, because I don't know if it's the same in the States, but in Europe, and specifically in Ireland, it's a big problem where teenage girls get to a certain age and they drop away from sport. Mm-hmm. And the number one reason that they said that they stopped playing their sport was it's not fun anymore. So, you need those people. We need to keep those people in sport, and we also need to keep those people in business in terms of the culture and being a high performing team. Different people contribute in different ways.
That's what I used to say to Camden. Actually, all the boys was have fun. It wasn't good luck because I knew there wasn't any luck involved
Yeah.
in it. It was go out and have fun playing.
And
Because that's why you keep playing.
yep, and the best games you play, you're having a lot of fun because you're beating the hell out of somebody, right? That's the most fun there is.
Exactly. Yeah.
How, when you took off the tennis hat, it's fairly easy transition to being a tennis
Tennis
coach.
visor, Dad.
But when you stop, when you
Visors,
huh?
not hats. Come on.
Oh yes, tennis visor. You're right. So when you took off the tennis visor, professional athlete identity, that's a fairly easy transition to still being touching it as a tennis coach. But when you shifted more of your time and effort into business, how did you adopt that new identity? Was it a struggle there, or did you feel it a natural progression?
Yeah, I think I think a combination of both. I think when I would go to Christmas dinner or a family event, the default question to me always was, "Oh, James, how's the tennis going?" Like that was always the initial question. And I think the evolution for me is I didn't always want to be known as a tennis person or tennis player, and I probably fought that for a little bit. But actually, I got to a point where I'm like, I need to embrace it because I've met some of the most incredible people in the world. I've been to some of the most amazing places in the world. And it wasn't because I studied really hard in school. I got good grades. I did a good course and I ended up working a good job, right? I met these people because I used my tennis racket when I was younger. And I think it's opened so many doors for me. And obviously we've touched on, say, Richard Branson, and I've met some incredible people through him and through the game of tennis. So I actually think I got to a stage more of actually, embracing it and learning to actually to leverage it, right? Because people respect professional athletes. The door is the door is a little bit open where people are open to having conversations with you, giving you advice and so on. Now the question is when you get in the door, how do you stay in the door? I think that's the big question. But it's definitely not an easy transition, and I know a lot of sports people really struggle with it, and a lot of people in general struggle with transitions from jobs or into retirement and so on. So, but I think again having that executive coach was a big help. Someone that really supported me and challenged me and so on. And I think it's embracing that identity, but not being too wrapped up in that identity as well.
What was the thing that you missed the most when you moved on from tennis? And then how did you find a way to scratch that itch? Whether it was the competition, the commitment, the camaraderie, what was it?
Yeah, I think one of the things I think is very different and I actually spoke to a rugby player about this who plays for Ireland, and it was sport is a lot more what's the word? I can tell you now, I'd say my ranking was 145. You can see everything about me, right? Or the rugby player used the example that, look, he played for Ireland, won Grand Slams and stuff. We train during the week, we play on a Saturday, and like you're under a microscope, right? I mean, you have 80,000 people watching you. If you drop the ball, if you do this,
and they got a tracker.
Yeah, exactly.
And now they have a tracker on the back, so they know exactly what they're doing.
So they know exactly
exactly
what they're doing. Where sometimes in business, I think you can meet certain people that can kind of, they're good salespeople, or they can kind of spin a story. Whereas for me, in sport, it's like if you said to me, "Oh, I was an amazing tennis player," I'd say, "Oh, what was your ranking?" Like, it's a lot easier just to kind of cut through that.
Right.
So I think that's that's something that's different. And then how did I kind of scratch the itch? I mean, I think now if I get a new client or something goes well, I definitely feel that buzz, but it's not the same as when you win a big tournament or you win a big match. So I don't know if I've figured out how to scratch that itch. I got tickets for U2 in Las Vegas this morning, so I'm looking forward to that. I think that's going to be like that's going to scratch a few itches. So so I definitely think I probably haven't. I think that's the hard thing for sports people and musicians and so on, is that high of winning or that adrenaline rush. It's hard to replace that, right? And I think that's where a lot of athletes run into problems with gambling, with alcohol and so on. But for me, I think business helps me. I think business, as a tennis player, I was very clear on, I'm climbing a mountain. I'm this ranking. I'm trying to get to this ranking. The mountain is there. I think now in business, it's taken me some time. So no, it wasn't just the next day. It's taken me probably a couple of years. But now I feel like, okay, there's the next mountain I'm trying to climb, right? So I think it's that philosophy.
How did you come up with the idea for Give Learn? Because it's unique, but it's not like a abstract unique. You know what I mean? So how did you come up with that idea to start that business?
Yeah, so with the executive coach I worked with, when we were looking at like things that I like to do and things I'm interested in, I kept coming back to people and performance and supporting people and helping people, and that was fundamentally what I'm passionate about. I love meeting people. I love connecting people. And then secondly to that, I'm really passionate about doing good in the world and creating a business that's for profit but for good as well. So after my career, I raised some money, did some charity stuff in terms of, I did a Guinness World Record and raised money. And then I just had this epiphany where I'm like, learning people's personal and professional development. When you come to a class, that should be connected to doing good for someone else somewhere else who's less fortunate. So that was kind of the link. And then Give Learn is a full, it's a online learning platform with a full kind of suite of soft skill classes. And I think soft skill development is so important in terms of presentation skills, communicating, dealing with things like imposter syndrome and confidence, and leadership and things like that. So it kind of all came together in some ways.
You talked about your, the desire for continuous improvement, being better than what you were the day before in tennis. How do you apply that still in business with, finding new courses, new things to teach and Give Learn or whatever that is for you?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I mean, I'm always learning. I'm always striving to learn. So one is I'm always listening to podcasts and reading books and always fascinated by what's out there. And then secondly, I mean, originally we had the kind of core classes on Give Learn in terms of the presentation skills and different things like that. And it really comes from feedback from users and from our companies that are using the platform. So we have a number of companies across the globe that are using the platform. We would do sessions once a month with our points of contact with the companies, and we'd ask, look, what are the topics, what are the themes that people are looking for, and we would ask our users as well. So that would spark ideas and so on. So like we had a program last year on imposter syndrome, which is something that came from one of our users in terms of, we should speak a lot more on how people have to deal with this thing called imposter syndrome around confidence. So always kind of listening to people around what's important to them and trying to support them in whatever way we can.
What's your go-to resource for that continuous learning? Do you have one?
Go-to resource? My weekly Give Learn class. I would listen to a number of podcasts. I would search on YouTube certain videos, certain topics. I'd get recommended different books from people. So there's probably no one thing. If you ask me at the moment, I would go for a walk every morning, and I would listen to, I would put in, I'd listen to a show, a podcast, and sometimes it's like, I listen to politics stuff, I listen to news stuff as well. It's not just business stuff, but I find like it's important to know what's going on in the world. And I think that helps me in terms of my own development and my own kind of purpose going forward.
No, that's great. And that's mine. I'll just share with you, mine is doing this show, and how I continue to learn and gain from people like yourself, our guests, because you said something early on that for me is just a great reminder. And that is, and you said this started with Joe Schmidt and Andy Farrell in the Irish rugby team, and the owning your mistake, and just that culture of not attacking the mistake, but owning it, and then being able to raise your hand and say, yep, how do I get better now? And that is such a powerful thing that we can all take on in anything that we're doing, whether it's flipping an egg over easy or winning a rugby match or a tennis match. All right. That I messed that up, but I'm not saying I'm a failure. I'm not identifying it as a failure. I said I failed that one time. Because I failed that one time, I'm not going to accept failure. I'm going to look to improve. What's that mistake that I made so I can own it and improve on it? So that's what I learned. Camden, how about you?
Well, first, thanks, James, for being one of the many people who I've talked with transitioning into sport, from sport into coaching. And apparently there's no way to scratch that itch. I keep asking people, and that itch is something I'm going to have to live with. So that's good to know. But the other piece I learned was that kind of epiphany of that you need the full spectrum of interest, even in business. We want everybody to be bought in, but you need those people who are partially bought in and have these other interests as well. Because if you shut the door to everybody who's not 100% dedicated, you're not going to get anyone, right? So I think that was a big one for me.
James, how about you? What did you learn?
Camden is kind of stealing my one in terms of that, because your point, Camden, around the different personalities that we need in business and how important that is. And I think it's something that I'd probably moved away and forgotten a little bit about, in terms of thinking that everyone wants to be at 100% and working 100% of the time, when people want different things. And it's trying to support people and understand that it's okay in terms of having those people with different personalities that maybe are not that relentless type, but offer serious value to a business, and drawing on that experience. So yeah, that was the thing that stood out for me the most.
Awesome. How do folks find you, follow you, learn more about what you have going on next, James?
So a couple of ways. So go to givelearn.net. So GIVELEAORN, givelearn.net. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, James Cluskey, CLUSKEY. And love to hear from you guys. And in terms of Give Learn, it's an online learning solution all around soft skill development. We have a full suite of online classes, live classes, users from all over the world, presenters from all over the world. We've had rocket scientists, entrepreneurs, astronauts, people from everywhere and anywhere, and would love to hear from you guys and connect with you guys, and really enjoyed the chat. Yeah, hopefully US rugby can get better in the next few years as well.
Got to keep hope up, man. We got to keep hope up. James, it's been great having you on our show today.
Thank you so much.
Camden, run us out.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to the Cam and Otis Show, and a special thanks to our guest, James Cluskey, for joining us today. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to pass along to someone else so they can enjoy it too. Make sure to follow the Cam and Otis Show on Facebook and Instagram, and you can watch full videos of the show on our YouTube page. And while you're there, hit that subscribe button too. As always, the full archive of our episodes available at www.camandotisshow.com. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all next time.